First of all, welcome everyone for this short keynote on uncertainty. But first of all, I would like to wish everyone and their family the best health in these difficult times. And what I would like to take you through is these moments of uncertainty and how you can find opportunities for yourself and your business to overcome. So I address this notion of welcome to uncertainty. Why? Because of course we know we are going through big times of uncertainty. And when I asked around different questions about how you can deal with uncertainties, then I asked my team how to come up with ideas that they would like to look into, and they say, hey, what about new ideas? What about scenarios? What about the mindset that you need to have in order to deal with that? But also about the process in uncertainty, and also like how are you going to act then as a person or as a company. So like what we've seen right now is this VUCA world, and it means that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what we see is that the world, the business people have really changed for good. I mean, this process is going on for a few weeks globally. But what we have to know for sure is that the world really has changed. So not only in the way we behave and the fewer people you see on the streets and the measures we take in order to prevent, to influence each other or to spread the virus. But you will also see right now, because we work remotely, then I believe that not many people are even willing to stand in the next traffic jam, right? And we also now believe that we understand how to work from home. And this is a picture of a friend of mine who now can stay with his dog. And you see that remote work is a fact of life nowadays. And we have to believe this. So I believe that even what happens after these times of uncertainty, that the way we are working and we are behaving is really changing. So what does that mean is we have to find a way to embrace uncertainty and be able how to deal with it. And this was a picture that we were drawing a few years ago, where we saw also that in the crisis, in the financial crisis, we also saw that the world has changed. And this was a picture of a traditional bank, where we saw that customers were not docking into the big harbor anymore. We saw also that these different channels here, what you can see here and here, are very hard to reach. And here the model of 363 is where you charge 3%, and you give 3%, you charge 6%, and at 3 o'clock you start to play golf. That is a business model that has disappeared. And here we see rules and regulations that has completely changed. So the world we used to know was much more predictable, and I think there was also because of the fact that we did not have internet as a medium to spread messages so fast. So what we used to look for was certainty, because certainty feels comfortable, it's easy to understand. But what we are facing with is uncertainty, and that means that we need to deal with a new world. And what does this new world look like? Well, I think it's not only about the virus that we see at the moment, but it is also to do with new technologies, right? So we see that autonomous driving and autonomous flying is technically possible, but we don't really know what this new world is going to look like, right? So there's also a little bit about uncertainty. And when you see that we have leaders globally who have unpredictable behavior, then we used to believe that due to this globalization, the borders the country borders were going down, so trade would be much easier. But then when Trump came with these messages on trade, then we realized that this world is changing completely, and we're not something that we had in mind when it comes to scenarios for the near future. And then we saw also, due to the eruption of this volcano in Iceland a few years ago, that also unpredictable events happened. So flights were canceled and so on. Things that we actually had in mind that were really common. And now we see a new reality on the streets, that this picture from New York, Times Square, is actually almost empty. So what we see is right now a very different time where we see different business and people are at their homes, not working. But then the question is, okay, so how do we stay ahead of what's going on in the market in the next few months? And I believe that if we are not acting at the moment, then you might see that competitors are passing you in the next few months to come. And you think, how come that I was not so active? Or how come that I didn't see these opportunities ahead of time? So before I dive deeper into seeing these opportunities and what you need to in order to see them and act on that, I think it's also important to understand what causes uncertainty. So this uncertainty, of course, it's driven by the global corona crisis. And why? Because we don't know when this is going to end. And what we see is, as a result of that, then there's an economic development that is not looking very well. So we see that some companies take benefit of this, but most companies do not, as we know with these bars, restaurants, etc. And because of all this, we see that you and me as a customer, we are changing our behavior because we need to work from home. We're not allowed to go out. So that is important to understand what causes this uncertainty. And what we see is that more than 50% of people, they don't like this uncertainty. And I was questioning myself, why is that people don't like uncertainty, right? And what we see is that people fear the unknown. So if they have no clue where they go, then people feel uncomfortable. And that has a bad feeling, right? So imagine yourself, some people, if you say we're going to go on a trip and we don't know where we're going, not everybody is excited about that. Another reason what causes uncertainty is also that it takes away control. So if you don't have control about your destiny, then people feel uncomfortable, and that causes uncertainty. We also see that this uncertainty keeps also the brain working because we keep on thinking about it, right? I think also when you look at these last few days, we are constantly informed about all these risks and all these uncertainties and all these events. And I think a lot of people can't sleep at night because the brain keeps on working and working. What we then also see is if you let yourself go too much and be influenced by this media too much, then that can easily result into bad moods. Because looking at all these pictures, at this uncertainty, it doesn't make you feel happy or doesn't make you feel better, right? And then the question is, okay, so how can we deal with this uncertainty? What makes us to see opportunities, and what makes us that we can step up and take advantage of this? So one thing is that we always need to make the right choice. So what we see in terms of uncertainty, we are uncertain about picking the right product. So here we use reviews of others so that we can make the right choice. But there was also one guy who had a very smart idea about making the right choices and not wasting too much energy, because he chose to wear his same clothes every single day. So that was the reason, or the way that Steve was dealing with uncertainty. But I would like to go a little bit deeper into how this works for business. So what do we do in business when we look at uncertainty? We feel that uncertainty is all about risk, because when we don't know for sure what the outcome will be, then we see that is a big risk. And then we feel that risk is bad. So as business people, we don't like to go in that area, because if you go to your bank and you say, I have this wonderful business plan and I need an investment for the next 3 years, and they ask you, okay, so what is it that you know for sure and what is certain? And you say, I don't know, my plan is one big risk. I'm not sure if you would get any investment from the bank. So why does this all matter is I believe that we need to be able to think differently. And this thinking differently is a way to deal with this uncertainty. So what is that about? I think you can divide this into 3 different sections. So one is about tools. We need to understand what kind of tools we need to use to deal with uncertainty. It's also about different skills, and it is about a complete different mindset. So let's look into mindset first. What we see is that in these times of uncertainty, some people freeze because they simply don't know what to do. So we also see that in our own team and with the clients that we work, because things are uncertain. It's hard to move because we're not sure what the outcome will be. So one thing when it comes to mindset, we should be able not to freeze and also help each other to get out of this frozen mood, right? Another thing what we see is that it is important to lead by example. So right now, when we are working from home, then you just need to walk the extra mile and set the extra step that you show that you are working from home, but also that you show that you are the big communicator and that you make sure that people have maybe digital lunch breaks and maybe digital Friday afternoon drinks, just to make sure that you are able to connect. So one of the key things in this mindset is leading by example. The other thing is investing as a digital mindset. Why? Investment in digital hardware, for example, is important to figure out how you can do the work that you've been doing in the past in the more physical environment. How can you change that into a digital environment? And what we are doing right now is we are exactly using this technology, this Service Hub 2S, to do this webinar. And we as a company have also completely shifted our way of working from this physical space we call the creative village into a digital space where we can co-create, work together, and accelerate ideas. So it's also about investing in this digital way of working and the digital mindset. And the other thing is also about thinking in the long term. So right now we see that this disruptive period is going on for a few weeks, but at some point we know that's going to turn back into a little bit the way of working in a normal way. So we not only need to think about how we operate as a company right now, but we also need to understand what would that look like in the next few weeks to come. So this is all about mindset. And when you think about the skills that we see that is required to deal with uncertainty, we were working on a book. It was called Design a Better Business, and we published that 4 years ago. And what we realized is, as a result of the speed of technology and therefore also the change of customer behavior, we realized that the existing skills, more educated in schools, these management skills, were not helping us the way to move forward. And I will show you what kind of skills we need to deal with nowadays. And this is a picture that we used for the last few years in order to explain to our teams and our clients what that means. And we believe it's all about thinking like a designer. And even though Karl Lagerfeld passed away, we think this is an excellent way to show that designers think in a very different way. So if you ask designers in this time how they feel, they will tell you that they see this as the most exciting times ever. And why? Because they believe that in these times of uncertainty, then the most crazy things can happen, because it opens doors to many different opportunities, and it forces you to think about things that you have never thought about before. And what you see is even in this time is before designers were questioning themselves to move out of the ordinary and out of this world in order to come up with some complete different world in order to become creative. But then the question is, okay, so what does that look like? So one is what you need to keep in mind is to think like a designer. But then what that means is that they would always start with a clean sheet. So starting with ideas, you should not stick to what you already know of, or systems or products that you already know about, but it's important to start to think from scratch. So I like to show this as a blank sheet that you need to come up with ideas and start just to think from scratch and not being bothered by any existing companies or structures in order to let your mind go freely, right? So start with the blank sheet. What customers also, what designers also do is that they explore different options. So when we used to think as managers, we always want to find this one single solution for a problem, but that's not the way they think. So we wanted to think about a problem and to solve that one single idea, but they look at multiple perspectives. So for them, in their mind, there is not just one single solution for these problems. And here, what you see in the background, this is a sketch from the Opera House that the architect made. And this was not one of the only sketches. This was not one of the first sketches. There were many of them. And therefore, also, when we look at opportunities in nowadays world, there is no one single solution for our problems. So if you see your company is struggling at the moment, there are different options that you can explore in order to find new ways to add value. The other thing what we see is that designers do not start with a prototype or with a concept or with a product. They first would like to understand the customers much better. So they start to observe customers and start to ask them questions. So what is truly important here is to reach out to the customer first and understand what they like, what they don't like, and what the problems are that they want to get solved. Another one is that designers work visually. So there's no need to write a big plan when you come up with new solutions. It's more important to sketch ideas. And this is an idea that we developed together with another media company, where we said, when we look at ideas nowadays, when we used to organize these big events where everybody needed to come together, and we're working on those offsites for a few months, and then at this one day, everything needs to happen and the strategy needs to be clear. Right now, in this new reality, we see that it could be organized in a different fashion. So it could be many events happening, for example, throughout the year, and with different people connected to other parts of the organization. And you see that this is a complete different picture from the left-hand side. And this is a way that you can sketch ideas, visualize them, and that means that you can also invite others to be part of that idea. So it's a different way of working than us as managers to write a plan. And the other thing is about designers, the capabilities is about asking the right questions. And this whole notion of asking questions, there is a book and it's called The Mom's Question, and that's written by Rob Fitzpatrick. And he addresses very well what kind of questions you need to ask if you would like to understand customers better. So long story short, there's no need to talk about the future. It's more important to ask people, what are the alternatives that you are using right now if you're not using our product, for example. We come back to that shortly through a different example. And the other thing what designers do, they don't sit in their designer space and work by themselves, but they work together with different people from different disciplines. So this was an example that we work with one of the big software companies in San Francisco. And here, for example, you see an entrepreneur. Here you see somebody working at the bank. Here you see somebody as a designer who started to create these kind of prototypes. And here is a facilitator, that's me. So co-creation is one of the key things that shows designer skills, because what you see in these moments of uncertainty, you can't do these things alone. So co-creation is a key skill. And I think one of the crucial things is to set up experiments. And this is maybe a crazy example of Breaking Bad, but what we see here is that it is important to not figure out this one single solution that we talked about, but it is about setting up a series of experiments and to figure out if customers like this, yes or no, and if they are willing to pay for that. So this is all about understanding not only a new mindset to deal with uncertainty, but you see also that we need to have different skills. And when we work with teams together, we see that not everybody has these designer skills, right? So for some, they feel more comfortable when they freeze and sit separately, and where others are stepping out of their building, start to connect to customers, start to have conversation, start to sketch new ideas, start to co-create and set up experiments. So the other thing I want to talk about is the notion of using different tools. So when you look at different tools, there are a few tools that I would like to discuss with you. So one thing is about the business model canvas, as you might be familiar with, is the question, okay, so what does it look like if you need to revisit your business model? So first, for those who don't know, these are the 9 building blocks of the business model canvas. And this explains how you, at the moment, add value to your customers. So, for example, if you happen to be a restaurant and then people love to come to your restaurant to have a bite and some food, they might have found you through your channel on the web because of recommendations and customers with reviews who really love you. So these are the customer segments with maybe families who come to your restaurant, and then here they charge you either dollars or yen for the food. Then this used to be the way you create value to your customers. And then what you need to do is you need to be able to cook and to serve. Then your key resource might be the big kitchen. Maybe you have suppliers and partners who help you with different food and the activities. And then you see that there is a cost to it. So you used to run this model because it worked. People loved your restaurant and they love to come there maybe every week. But right now that has changed, right? So what we see is that the way we used to add value is not possible anymore, simply because we cannot visit the restaurant. So then what we need to understand is what are the current changes that we see from a restaurant perspective, for example, that will change our business model. So if you stick to this idea of this restaurant, we see that it's not possible to serve in the restaurant anymore. You might maybe not able to serve your existing customers. So the question for you is, how are you able to add value in a new way? And by working with this business model, you can find out different ways to figure out how to add value. So one thing is, before we go back to that, is you can look from different perspectives at your business model. So when you understand that the current limitation of your model, you could ask yourself, given the resources I have, and this is what we call the epicenter way of thinking. So when we have these resources like the people and the cooks, what is it that we can offer and deliver differently? How can we use not only the restaurant, but maybe different channels? and how could we reach out to maybe existing customers or to different customers. That's a way how you can start thinking about your business model. The question is also, maybe you could think together with partners if you can find different value propositions and maybe connect to customers differently. So what you could come up with is different options and not one to figure out if you are able to deliver value in a different fashion. So given the way you think about your business model, maybe not a restaurant, the steps are still the same. So one is try to understand how you add value at the moment. Then second, try to understand what are the current changes, and then figure out what is a new way to add value to my customers. So we see then also that in these new normal is that we see a shift from the analog model to a digital model. Why? Because we use this digitization in order to maybe order online or to work remote. And the other question what you could ask yourself is, if this is your business model operating in an analog fashion, then what would my digital twin business model look like? And that doesn't mean necessarily that you only need to look into your channel, but you could ask yourself for each and every building block, what would that mean if I started to work digitally? So my channel is not a physical channel, for example, for a restaurant, but it's only digital. Maybe also my value proposition is not physical, but digital. What is that going to look like for each and every building block of my business model? So we have seen this shift where companies move from a physical to a digital business model before, but now as a result of this disruption, we see that it's actually accelerating and moving towards a digital model more and more. So if you think about this, your business model, and to shift to a digital space, then for each and every building block, these are the questions that you can start asking yourself. So the first question is, what would it look like for existing or for new customers, right? Am I able to still work with my current customers? Or am I able to connect to new customers? What would it look like for my digital experience? How can I create an experience that people are excited with in a digital space? Then in terms of channels, what kind of digital channels can I use? And then for revenue, the question is, what does new revenue streams look like? And maybe also the pricing needs to change. For example, where you see now restaurants that they start to offer a delivery model, then because if you're not using the restaurant as a channel, you might charge a different fee for your food compared to the fee that you would ask in the restaurant itself. Then the digital offer, this is a big question, what that can look like. And then as a result of that, you also need to understand what are the activities that I can organize in a digital way. What are digital technology or resources that I can use? How can I automate more activities? And can I use different partners in order to do that? And then can I use an experiment way of thinking, not coming up with this big solution at the moment? So what is important for this sheet, it is not a new idea that needs to tick all these different boxes, but it starts to make you think about new ideas when you go through these boxes step by step. So you can use it in that way. Think about a digital offering. Think about digital experience. Maybe you start to work with digital partners. And what you will see then is that there is no one single solution. So as a restaurant, you maybe end up with one solution. I'm not going to run the restaurant anymore because I don't see this as feasible, and maybe you start to rent out your space and do something different. The other thing is what you could think of is how can I maybe do a delivery, but the question is what are the costs then related to this type of services, and what are the profits that I can make? And that might be something different from your current model. And then the question for you is, how can I organize it in such a way that it's also a feasible model maybe for now, so that you might be picking up your former model again when you get back to the new normal. And this could be like an other idea, or maybe an idea about the same concept that you were already running. So what I wanted to stress here is that there are different ideas and different solutions, and there's not one single option. Here I show some digital business models, some that you are very familiar with. So when you look at Netflix, they started to shift from something physical into something digital, and you saw that their whole business model has completely changed. We're not going to dive in that much deeper, but this is the digital shift, and also with physical taxis where Uber connects drivers and consumers, or in other way, drivers and passengers. And this is one example of a friend of mine in Vienna, and he came up with a coffee shop where elderly people work, and they bake their favorite cakes. So you can go there, have your coffee and have your cake. But when this lockdown came, he needed to ask themselves, with 90 of their team members, how can we still be employed? How can we still be in business with our concept? And what they came up with is that they normally would have this centralized kitchen, but now they start to cook and bake all these pastries and cakes at home. So they would have like 90 new kitchens, and through an app you could order all these lovely cakes from home, and you could get coffee as well. So they started to set up this experiment and figure out if people really loved it. So they started to then create this model, and now they're still in business. They see this as an alternative in these times of lockdown, and also to keep themselves busy and to make people happy with the cake and the coffee. But they do believe that the model that they used to entertain before, that will come back in maybe a few months from now. So if you are ever in the country of Austria and you are in Vienna, I strongly recommend you to go to this place, because they have one of the best cakes that you can ever imagine. Another idea that was inspired by our colleague Justin from San Francisco, he said that we do see restaurants that are picking up this delivery of different of their food, but this restaurant took it one step further. They said, okay, we're gonna set up a complete new concept where we sell bagels. So that's what they call the bagel shed. So what I liked about that is that they said, okay, we have a wonderful restaurant, but we pick one special product out of that, and we create a temporary brand, and this is what we're going to sell and offer the market, and that's different from what we have, what we used to do. The other thing what they started to create is a drive-through, and they also did the delivery to different homes. So instead of offering the same meals and through a delivery at people their homes, no, they created a separate brand, they created a drive-through, and they did the delivery with their own people. So that's the way they start to become creative and seeing new opportunities how to do business. And this was also a concept that we explained, that we said, what if it is not possible to do these big offsites anymore on one single location, but what would it look like if we do that throughout different periods time of the year? So that's a different way of thinking, and this is what we are starting to experiment with discussions with different potential clients. So how to see these new options, right? So what we see is you can ask yourself, if I'm not that creative, what is it that I'm going to do? Well, what is key, and that what you saw before, that what is all about skills of designers, is that you just have to talk to customers. And my question to you is, in the last 3 weeks, how many digital cups of coffee did you have when you were talking to customers? And you know, there's always an excuse to not pick up the phone and not be in contact. But that's what I call these people who get into the freeze mode, where they are afraid to do anything. But if you reach out to customers and you have conversations, I'm really curious to understand what kind of problems they have, what they did not have before, and that you are might able to solve at the moment, right? So when you see that people are more isolated, they start to work from home, they need to take care of family, they need to refurbish their homes in order to create offices. You see that complete new problems appear, and that there are tons of ways to solve these kind of problems. So one of the key things is, if you lack creativity and you have nowhere to go, then the only thing what you need to do is to make sure you have digital cups of coffee and have these conversations and really ask them about their problems and how they would like to get that solved. And maybe one of these problems is a problem that you can help to solve. And this is one of the tools that that helps you in order to collect this information. And this is what some of you might know, it's the value proposition canvas. And that is really where you talk to these customers, and this is all about how you observe them. And the questions that you can ask yourself is, what is the job to get done? So maybe their job right now is to get work done while they still need to feed and entertain the family, right? What are the pains at the moment? Maybe they are short of time, maybe they're about to lose their job, I don't know. Could be different ideas, could be different pains. And what are the gains that they have? And then the question is, how could you solve that? And how can you come up with new value propositions that help them to solve their problems? So one thing is really step up and go and meet them and see them and get that information. And this is a tool that helps you to structure these thoughts and to see how you can have those conversations and make sure that you create value or a product or a service that customers are willing to pay for. So what we see is, one tool is the business model canvas that helps you to understand how you can create value in a new way. And then second is using this value proposition tool to get a much better understanding of customers, and at the same time also understand what kind of value you can deliver. And another way you can look at this is, when I address the business model idea, is how can you digitize or create a different experience in the channels, how you approach customers. So this is called the customer journey canvas. And these are actually the moments that your potential customer might consider your product or service. So here, these are the key moments. And then you could ask yourself right now, what are the moments that we are present in a digital fashion, right? So when they consider our services or they look at alternatives, is it something that we are popping up at the moment? Is there a digital experience? What would it look like if they come to our website? What does that mean for us? Do we send them a note or something else? So by mapping these different customer needs in time and mapping the different ways how they interact with us and think about a digital experience, that is something very different than that they would normally walk by a shop and see your advertising. So what I like about this idea, it is moving towards a digital experience. And for you is the question, how are you going to show up at which moment in time? Then another thing what we heard about a lot recently is how to design different scenarios. And when you think of scenario planning, it can be a very complicated tool. It can also be approached very scientifically, but I really would like to show you a more simple way how you can look at scenario planning. So with few clients, we've been doing this exercise this week, and one of the key things when it comes to scenario planning is to understand for yourself what are the unknowns at the moment, and more in scientific terms, you could say what are these unknown variables at the moment. And we were thinking about these unknowns for a media event company, where we see that a lot of events have been cancelled and we're not sure when they're going to be organized again, whether they are postponed. Take, for example, the Olympic Games. And the question is, we have a new normal today, but what are the different scenarios that we can look at? And one way to frame that is when you think about these unknowns, then it's unknown when this lockdown is going to be over. That's one thing that we don't know for sure. So that's maybe about the level of freedom where we are able to travel or that we're able to do. Then the other unknown is all about us as customers. It's about customer behavior. So are we gonna change completely our behavior, or are we still staying at home even though we are allowed to travel? So when you look at these unknowns, you could set it up like this. So this could be our customer behavior, where we are all positive and we are freely moving around. And then here, when the lockdown is completely over, so there is no lockdown anymore, then you might consider that this was before COVID-19, right? And when you are in a situation where behavior has completely changed, so we are very afraid to move, and then here we see a complete or partly a lockdown, then this scenario is all about COVID-19. So this is the scenario that we are dealing with at the moment. And what you can see here is a scenario where the lockdown is over, but us as consumers, we are behaving very differently. So here you could see that this is kind of I would frame it like a limited travel, or maybe cautious tourism. And on this side, it could be the behavior where everybody is still behaving as normal, but there's a lockdown, and you might argue that these are limited events because it's not allowed from the government to organize them so much. So one way to think about the different scenarios is not about being right or wrong, but we know that this is our new reality. And the question is, are we going to shift back to this reality? And then we can dive deeper into understanding what would it mean if we have limited travel possibilities. So customers are not willing to travel that much. We see less and less tourism. What are the value propositions and the business models that we see in this space? And what does that mean for our company? And when you will look on the left upper part, then we see that there is maybe less competition in terms of events. But what is the business model that we can entertain for the next period to come to figure out, is this going to move like this and slowly here, or are they going to move this like this? And it's not about being right or wrong, but we have seen that all these conversations about going deeper into these scenarios really starts to help you think, what would this world look like if we believe that this is reality? And how are we behaving as a company? And how are we going to be structured? And how is it that we are going to add value? And what you then can see is that we are dealing at the moment with the now, and then there will be an intermediate period with maybe scenario 2 or scenario 1, and we don't know how much time it will take. And then we might enter back to a normal, or maybe lower than the normal, or maybe everybody starts to go crazy and go book holidays, and we might be even get above the normal. So what is exciting about this way of thinking is that we don't know all the answers, but by asking these questions to you and your team, you start to look at these worlds slightly different, and you can then imagine different possible and plausible futures. So that's about this notion of scenario planning. So this was a 45-minute crash course about how you can deal with uncertainty. And what I find important is that when we look at innovation normally, it is very, very hard to create the right circumstances, right? Because if your company is doing well, there's not that much appetite. So it sounds very weird, but at the moment we see these big opportunities because we are forced to think out of the box and maybe inside the box with the limited time and resources we have. So what we learn here is that mindset as a new rule needs to apply here. So we can't sit in a corner and freeze. And you see that the business model canvas is really the key to understand how you are able to create value in these different worlds. So that's for us always a key tool to see different futures. And the other thing what you see is with these digital journeys is that's really the new way of seeing these sales funnels, because at the moment we are all digital, so you're forced to think about that way. And what about the future? I think when you look at these scenario exercise is on the one hand now some companies are doing well, but most are not doing well, so they are scaling down fast. But the question for you is, what would it look like then if we need to scale up again? So I believe that we need to be ready in our head and with our teams to not only scale down, but also to understand how we can scale up. So I believe that these tools, how you can act as a designer, helps you to start reconsider, rethink what it looks like today. You can then redesign new, different alternatives, and then restart your business in a new way. So I hope this was inspiration for you guys, and I'm open to have different questions for you.
We already have one.
Yeah, one question. Yeah.
Jasper is wondering, how do you deal with customer behavior in crisis when exploring jobs to be done, slash the pains and the gains, for post-crisis when everything is back to normal and customer behavior is likely to be different? So right now they have a different mindset than when all of this is over. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think first of all, Jasper, that's a very good question. And I think that you could also look at your own perspective, right? So what is it for the last 2 weeks that you've been doing differently? And maybe you bought different products that you would normally not buy. Maybe you were doing different activities that you would normally consider not to do. So I think like in the now, there are clear examples of also about yourself, how you're behaving. But what I find interesting is, okay, so what is that going to look like in the near future? And that is also, I believe, that the question that you have. And I think the only way to figure that out is to start asking questions yourself. So for example, when it comes to products and services, you might say, okay, so if the lockdown is over in the 1st of June, I would right away go to my favorite restaurant. I'm going to book it already in advance because I love it and there's no issue, etc. But I believe that maybe for your holidays, that will be a different thing. So you might think that a holiday is maybe more expensive. It also requires travel, and maybe you're not able or willing to take the journey at the moment. So I think one thing is to think about it yourself, what you would do, also to reach out to friends and family to figure out, hey, what is it that you do? But I believe that it's important right now to stay close to customers and figure out what they are doing at the moment. And I believe that those companies who now step out and step up to be in contact with these customers, that they have the best opportunities to figure out where is value next for them. Other questions?
So far not, but we do have a tip from Diane, and she wants to share with everyone. For business operators, it's a good time to empower your team to be happy time travelers to alternative futures.
So she said, with your team, you are happy time travelers to explore the future, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that looks something like this. Okay.
Another one coming in. A follow-up question to the previous question of Jasper.
Yeah.
If a crisis changes consumer behavior, how do you determine that the change is in behavior for good? Isn't it that people are forced right now to behave differently?
Yeah, so I think, it was very hard to predict our behavior, right? So there's a very famous example where people are asked about a new mobile phone, like many years ago, and nobody was excited about that because they said, I'm never ever going to use a mobile phone because why would I use it? I believe that to understand how this behavior is changing for good, that's very, very difficult. But I think that by designing those scenarios, I think that helps you to get answers to what that would look like for your company, right? So I think that when you look at these possible futures and think like, hey, what is it that I see that how customers are behaving in these different scenarios, I think that's going to shape you different ways to think about that. And I think that everybody is curious about this behavior, to think, if I run this restaurant, are people coming back to my restaurant, yes or no? Or if not, what is it that I need to do in order to change that? So I also seen different setup of restaurants where they have these plastic walls between the tables and that they're served in a kind of different fashion. So I think the crucial thing is you can't predict it. And I think to stay close and also to work with different scenarios, it helps you to understand the behavior better. And I think it also helps you to prepare for that. So what we also see when we look at the different scenarios, we are in touch with customers. We ask them, what about these events? What is that going to look like in terms of travel, etc.? And then we know more instead of just being frozen in the corner of the room. So unfortunately, there's no solution. There's no one single answer. But I think to stay close to those customers and to figure out with understanding different scenarios, that's definitely a much better way to understand this.
Thanks. Rachel is wondering if you have any suggestions how to help more conservative companies to get into this mindset right now when all they want to do is freeze.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to this notion of when would companies, when are they willing to move? I think right now they should be forced by these economic circumstances, right? So if they're not going to move, then for sure they're not able to survive. But I think I can also read your question slightly different. Is, you know, when you look at this number of people, then for sure we learned that more than half of the people, they are uncomfortable with this uncertainty. So you can know for sure that this half will freeze and will not do anything. So I think that few people in the company are willing to move ahead, and I think it is important to look at these people. Mostly they have this rebel mindset, and they see opportunities, and they go to places where you have not been before. And I think it's a good thing to connect to these people. So at least if, for example, in the near future, you can see that your company has shrunk to a different size than before, at least you've been able with those rebels to explore different options and different ideas, and you might have come up with this solution instead of staying here on this maybe Titanic scenario, and that's not going to help you to explore new ways to create value. So I would connect to those people who are willing to move, who are exploring new ways of creating value, and they might come up with new solution that you can help with. Right?
Yeah, thanks again. Rick is wondering kind of the same thing, but then for their clients. So how can customer empathy be built in a B2B setting if clients are in freeze?
Yeah, so I think what we have experienced with our team when we talk to different customers, I mean, there's a lot of things going on at the moment, right? So what we have seen is that there is this period of 2 to 4 weeks time that everybody needs to figure out what is this new normal and how can they operate in this disruptive time. So we see some companies that they are super busy with delivering new tools in order to create value for the health sector. But we've also seen different companies who need to shift events to different months and so on. So I think there is a period of time that people are extremely busy, but I would really reach out and connect with them and figure out, okay, so if you're freezing, what is actually the reason that you are afraid of? And I had a conversation with one lovely entrepreneur today, and he said, you know, this is my third financial crisis. So he said, I've been here before. He said, and I know that there's no need to panic. I know that we can create value. I have comfort in my team. I have comfort in my business. But I also realize in this new normal that I need to be able to work with a different team. So he asked himself in his team, who are these people in these times that help our company in order to move forward? So he needed to make decisions on who would be on board and who would not be on board. And the similar idea he had for his customers. So he said that he wants to move where customers are moving. And if they're freezing, you can figure out how they can be unfrozen. But if not, then that might not be maybe the people or the clients that you would like to connect to. Because if you connect to the same people who freeze, then you're not going to help you to explore new areas to develop, or new energy, so to say.
Yeah, cool.
Right?
Yeah, let's go to the final question because of the time.
Yeah.
We will answer all of them in an email, or we will get back to you. So for now, the final question. Let me see. This one has a lot of thumbs up, so let's go for that one. How do we prevent companies not sliding back on their sustainable goals, as when they open, they will be margin driven again?
Yeah, so this has to do with our point of view, how we look at sustainable goals and sustainable businesses and sustainable business models. So we believe that sustainability is not a customer need, but it's the way the value is delivered, and it cannot be delivered if there is no value. So what do I mean is that when it comes to sustainable value, there is also a monetary value. Otherwise, people are not willing to pay for that. So what I believe is that sustainability goals and offering value to customers, they need to go hand in hand. And it's a little bit, it's a conversation that we can have for the next hour to come. But the way we look at this is we see a circular shift of business models where we see different value delivered by not looking at this as a linear business model where everything is going to be ending up in a trash bin, but that there is a circular model where we keep goods and value into the chain. And this is just one way of looking at sustainable business models. But that means for us, when it's sustainable, that there is true value for customers. And when there's true value for customers, people are willing to pay for your products or services. So if you ask me the question, like, how do we prevent companies just to be not going back to the making the margin business again and looking at the financials, I think these two go hand in hand. So right now I also see we need to figure out to create value. That's how we are able to be profitable. And when we are profitable, we're also willing and able to invest in our sustainable goals. So these need to go hand in hand. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining this session. And you might know that this is all available in a book, but then that needs to be printed, needs to be shipped. If you go to this website, then you will find, so design a better business.com. Everything that I just talked about is described in this toolbox where you can find the tools, you can find instructions how to use it. And when you look at the blog, we also show different case studies. The other thing, what is even more exciting, is that we offer the online course for free. So with the email that you will get afterwards from my lovely colleague Joyce, there will also be an address where you can find this free online course, and that helps you to start using these tools and figuring out a new way to create options, and most important to deal with uncertainty. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm very excited to see new alternatives and new ideas, and if there would be one single change that you would do or thing that you would do differently today or tomorrow, then our team is very happy and we are more than willing to listen to that or give you support in any way. So thank you very much, and we might see you soon online in the toolbox, in the blog, or in the online course. Thank you so much.